Today we're taking a look at Leviathan Wakes by James Corey, one of our best-selling sci-fi stories. And the plot begins with a young woman hiding in a spaceship alone as her ship is attacked by unseen assailants and her crewmates are murdered, thrown out the airlock into space to suffocate and die or freeze to death. And she's left here hiding alone, and then bam, cut to the next scene, cut to the next set of characters. And it's a good start. It pulls you in. Immediately you want to know where the story's going, who are these characters, who is this girl, and what's going to happen next. And then we jump to our cast of main characters, what we know as our main characters. James Holden is the kind of sub-lieutenant, if you will, for the group, and they are out working to grab giant icebergs and harvest water for the folks living out in the asteroid belt, who are known as Belters. While on a mission, their vessel is destroyed. Their main vessel is destroyed by an unknown ship, and Jim Holden and the now crew chief announces to the world that Mars, because he saw a name on the ship, the stealth ship, before it sneaks away, and he announces to the world what's going on, and this sets off a chain reaction. The whole Earth and Mars go to war, and the leading political group in the belt throws their own hat in the ring as they're kind of vying for independence, as this discrimination between the worlds going on. They want to be a major player. And in the background, there seems to be this dark and powerful shadow group behind the scenes, pulling the strings and making things happen. And this kind of sets the stage for where the plot's going to go from here. And the world, I did actually really enjoy the world, because the tech for this sci-fi world is certainly sci-fi, but we are not quite there as far as Star Wars technology. It's much more that humanity has established space travel, and we're maybe like 100 or so, 200 plus years into space. We're exploring, but we haven't gone to thousands and hundreds of thousands of solar systems. We still kind of have the main world, or galaxy that we're familiar with asteroid belt, with Mars and Earth, and kind of all of this normal conflict that we're going. And this is where the world, the story takes place as everything begins to coalesce and Earth and Mars begin killing each other, throwing the belt, kind of where a lot of our story takes place, into an awkward spot. And for this section, I wanted to talk about James Holden, our main character, because this is a tricky part for the story for me, because I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the world, and I enjoyed James as a main character. But if you were going to describe this main character, I would describe him almost as a main character. And that's kind of how, one of the main characters of the book is how he felt. He's a good point of view for the story because he's an upstanding guy, kind of cowboy, morals, black and white, up for an adventure, and really unlikely to kind of drive anyone off. But the tricky part is he doesn't really go beyond that. He's kind of like a Boy Scout in space. He's not likely to drive the reader away, but he got a little annoying at times because he had a hard time seeing anything other than black and white. There was no bending or no reality in the world that seemed to come in there. Not a whole lot of nuance that he was willing to entertain. And he's always close to being interesting for me, but he never quite reaches that. He's a good point of view. And this is the tricky part with the characters in the book, is that the whole story is close to being great, but it never quite got there. I think it's good, but for me, that's where it stopped. It didn't really click for me where it seems to have for a lot of people. And for Jim's story, we follow the surviving members of the crew after their ship was destroyed. The captain and everyone else was murdered, and they fly across the galaxy trying to piece together what's going on and stay alive, as the stakes keep rising and, more people are trying to kill them. And the plot moves pretty fast. I think that's one thing where it's kind of A to B to C and so forth, trying to stay ahead of whatever malevolent powers are out there behind the scenes that are trying to kill them. And now it's trying to turn the major powers against each other into a war that could go nuclear, interplanetary nuclear, and destroy both worlds and the belt as we know it. It's a straightforward plot. It's good, but that's where I kept running into for the story. It's decent, but I wouldn't go much farther from there. It didn't draw me in. It didn't blow me away. It's good. James and the group kept a number of times felt like they took their status as main character and used it to thrust themselves into the action, to the limelight time and time again. And the problem with doing sorts of things, one, I guess it does make sense because you want your main characters to do cool things, but it made the world feel empty because for some reason no one else was as good as our main characters. Again, we want our ragtag crew to rise to the top and everything, but again, it kind of really made the world feel fairly empty because if the best people for the job are the main characters and the best people for the next job are the main characters and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it kind of makes it feel like, what exactly is everybody else doing to where our main characters, the ragtag group, is just outclassing everyone? And so while Jim Holden and the gang are traveling throughout space, we have our second plot that kind of weaves in and out of the story, and this follows Joe Miller, a hard-boiled, morally gray detective who's kind of supposed to counterbalance Jim Holden's paladin, black and white, lawful good morality. And for Miller, it always seems like he's on the edge of being a version of Russ Cole from True Detective. But instead of this, freak, this moral outcast who's kind of fallen on hard times, but in the end he comes through, he's kind of just fallen on hard times and going about and kind of fumbles his way from place to place. It doesn't really feel like there's any sort of brilliant connections or anything like that. It kind of feels like he just doesn't stop and eventually makes it, which is kind of, if you're aiming for that type of realism, but it doesn't make your character feel special. It also means that realistically anyone could have solved this case or made it to the next point, anyone at all. And this is the tricky part because there's not a whole lot going for Miller. You don't admire him. I kept waiting to see if there is anything redeeming about him. Even Russ Cole from True Detective, he's great at his job. He's fantastic, incredibly smart. And to balance it, he's a freak and an outcast. He's completely damaged due to his past, his past relationship with his ex-wife, what happened to his daughter. But for our book now, and it's not until Joe and Jim together, they meet up together finally and wander through this zombie-infested space station, does Joe Miller, really come alive. And it kind of surprised me. It felt like the author always viewed him as a low-key badass, but it never really manifested at all until this point. Again, I would describe him as a low-functioning alcoholic. This whole scene is great. They're realizing a large group of mercenaries and criminals are herding thousands of civilians into this sealed test tube of a city and letting a bioweapon, this new molecule, proto-molecule, come in and tear them to shreds, and watching this experiment play out. And it's great. It's really good scene. Joe finally shines by killing his way to save Jim and escape. He finally pulls through and we kind of see the man I think the author was always alluding at, but it takes a while to get there. And at that point, I kind of already felt that Miller was more or less kind of a loser. It was kind of more of a patch job that he was actually able to pull himself together to get them out. It felt like this is what the authors were after, but he wasn't fully there in the book. And again, for Joe's plotline and for Jim's as well, there's a mystery element to it where they're trying to figure it out. And the mystery for the plot is just kind of slowly revealed. Again, it's going to sound really like I'm really ragging on it. And it's not. I'm not trying to go for that. It's just all right. It just kind of unfolds. There's no great revelation or anything, Instead of there being a slow discovery and mystery, it kind of feels like someone's asking the question, who could be behind an evil worldwide plan to kill millions of people? And yeah, it's somebody who's evil and has worldwide plots to kill millions of people. That's it. At sections, it really felt less like a mystery and almost like, watching World War Z did, that kind of forgotten movie, if you will, where we're just going from A to B to C to D. And then we reach the end and it's solved. You don't really have to figure it out because you just go to the next step and then you get the answers. And this is tricky because for Joe, our cop character it never felt like he fully connected the dots. We have a lot of pieces of the puzzle and then we see the completed puzzle and on to the next, And again, it's going to come across as like this, I hope it doesn't come across as this excoriating criticism because it's not terrible. It's just straightforward, and it didn't really work for me. It worked well enough, I guess you could argue that. I finished the book. I enjoyed it. But, I'm considering looking at the second book. I've heard the second one is pretty good, even better. Builds on a lot of that. And Jim Holden's, black and white world there's some extra characters that really change it from there. So I'm curious. So if you do think the second book if you do have any notes on that, please let me know, because I'm really interested in seeing if people are like, yeah, first one's a little bit rough, but we get there in the end for the second one. So stick with it. For world building, there were little moments that show really good world building. Think swear words from Firefly, the "be seeing you" sign for goodbye from the prisoner. These little personality tics in a character that say a lot without explaining it, that say a lot about their background and the world around them. And for this, it comes in the form of the Belters, or people born outside normal gravity in the asteroid belt, and their physical signs. There's a difference explained by Joe Miller, hard-boiled space Pinkerton, to his friend, an Earther, that, Belters don't shrug. Earthers do that. Builders make a motion, sign with their hands, and it's these little things that people realize that make the world of difference, that really show the difference and make something feel different. But for the story, for Leviathan Wakes, that's about it. They mentioned this whole scene, this interaction, what felt like a dozen times, to where it kind of felt overused, where it's like, all right, we need another example, give us something else. There is the language difference for the Belters, that's pretty good, but again, there are too many sections where we meet people from different corners of space, and every character I met felt American, like American to the soul, which, as an American is great, but for an international, that sort of angle the story could be going for, it really felt like America, and that was very a Western idea and Western worldview, and we just carried that to space, and nothing really different came to fruition. At some point I'd be interested in doing a comparison to this book and another one called A Fire Upon the Deep, to really show how alien something could feel, how you could really push the boundaries for what, people are expecting. And again, for Leviathan Wakes, it's not going for anything too crazy. It's not going for what Annihilation is after as far as, making something truly alien. It's going for a much more traditional type of story, with traditional characters. You find, Jim, is more or less the cowboy, the Boy Scout, filled with the same morals as, you might expect in space, and the moral gray and nuance is carried by Miller, Joe Miller. But again, he has his own issues with the character, and so it kind of works, but for this story, I would say it's not pushing the boundaries. It's just delivering a solid story as expected. And so the key question for me is if I am critical of the story. I'm not saying it's amazing. I'm saying it's good, which is going counter to some people online and some of the reaction from what I'm seeing. The question is, why is it so well received? And, a lot of people have read it, and it does good as a story. I don't necessarily think the authors have written it the best possible. There's not a whole lot of people who could say that. But the bones for the story is there, and they are hitting plot points that are fun, that are satisfying. The plot points, you have on one hand, you have the space adventure with the ragamuffin crew of misfits trying to survive and against the odds avenge their dead captain and prevent the world ending. And on the other hand, you have Joe Miller, the hard-boiled detective who just won't give up. He's got one last job. And so the story sounds familiar, but there's a reason why these stories work. I enjoy superhero movies, but they all kind of follow the same beat. However, despite that, it's only after like 30 to 40 superhero movies did the rest of the world begin to get tired. This story works. So let me know what you think down below. I've heard book 2 is really good, quite good, better than the first one. So should I keep going? Should I stop now? What was your reaction? Is this a hard sell? Is this, a hard pass for you? Let me know what you think. The other thing I've heard is I've some people that I know who are watching through the show, and they're just like, it's awesome. It's such a good show. And it is one of those where I reading the book, I could really see that I think the show would naturally cut out certain points that are kind of dragging and really excel for the sections that do really well. Again, Jim and Joe on Eros' station, where the zombies and everything, the proto-molecule is starting to take over. That's a really cool scene. I think in a show, you could really translate that pretty cool. And you'll also have the sci-fi space effects. I think you could really elaborate and flesh that out in a good way. So let me know, does the show capture the heart of the story, and does it do a good job? So let me know. And also, I mean, of course, as always, if you disagree with me, let me know down below. I would really love to hear about it. I want to get a better idea of where people are at for this and what their reaction to the story is. So let me know. As always, I'm Jeff Cassidy. This is Fiction Applied. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.